Hello, everyone. Uh, Tonight we're going to do something a little different. I may not be doing in Anything Goes afterwards, but who knows? We'll see. Today I want to kind of revisit Hollywood. One thing that, if you guys follow me at all, know about what I like to do is I like to go back in history to fast forward to now and see what's been going on, what's different. So what you just I'm going to be reading from a blog. The blog is called Close Encounters with Celebrities and Show Business: Clones, Satanists, Prostitutes, and Serpents Dying for Attention, literally. It's posted on June 2nd, 2012 by Indian in the Machine. If you go to the description box, you can see the direct link, so you can read the rest of it there. What I'm actually going to do is also on that description box is a link to The Scariest Movie Ever. He went over this in 2015, January 21st, 2015. It's 52 minutes long and 15 seconds. What I'm gonna actually end up doing is having it play back, so you're listening it through him. He's got like 1.6 million views on this, so there's a lot of views. So we know what's been going on with the Me Too movement and whatnot, and all the stuff that's been going on through Hollywood. Now, it's 2018, 6 years have passed, so what can we glean from this Hollywood insider who is Indian in the Machine? Hi, Eric. Anyways, without further ado, I will play it back. Enjoy, and we'll talk about it afterwards.
Mine. Hey guys, it's KJ from The Scariest Movie Ever, and I recently made a really interesting discovery. I wanted to share it with you in this video. I've always been fascinated with mysteries, mind control in our modern media, occult symbolism in our world and what it really means, mysteries of the cosmos, mysteries of God, and not only exposing the so-called Illuminati symbols in our popular culture, but exploring the meaning behind these symbols. After all of these years of researching all these strange subjects, sometimes it's hard not to feel like you've seen it all. And then, just when you think you've seen it all, something like this comes along. So long story short, I stumbled onto this forum that wound up really blowing my mind. Had a lot of amazing information in there, and the whole thing, as I was reading it, it resonated with me. It was posted from a woman that clearly has worked in the Hollywood industry, so I originally found it on a website called Indian in the Machine, and it was titled Close Encounters with Celebrities in Show Business: Clones, Satanists, Prostitutes, and Serpents Dying for Attention, literally. How could I not want to read this article? It really was a fascinating article, and it wasn't really so much an article as it was a blog. She was just making entries, and I traced it back as far as I could. I only found it in 2 other places. On Indie in the Machine, it was posted back June 2nd, 2012. Now, I found it going all the way back to August of 2010, and it was posted by a person calling themselves Felicia G. And since then it was posted in 2 other places, and that's it. Now the reason I thought that was so interesting is because of all the information in these blog entries. Now take it from me, I have seen my share of these kinds of messages, these kinds of posts, these blogs. I know a lot of you have seen this stuff too. I mean, any one of us that are interested in these kinds of things, the so-called conspiracy theories, or the Illuminati, or UFOs, or the paranormal, whatever it is. I mean, most of us who've really done our digging for a few years, we've seen most things, right? Most of us have seen most of this stuff. But every now and then something comes along that's just special. Something comes along that you've not heard before. And I promise you, this is one of those times. This is why I thought it was very interesting. It's been around for 5 years now, and hardly anybody's really heard about this. And I really think the best way for me to do it is just to read it and let her kind of explain it in her own words. Now, I'm not covering everything. She goes off into a lot of different tangents. Sometimes it's stuff just about the business or about her life out there. Sometimes it gets into clones. Now, if I was to do something on clones, that would take a whole other video. So maybe I'll touch on that another time. But what I'll do is I'll go ahead and leave a link underneath this video so you can go and check out the post for yourself and read the whole thing. I just kind of pulled out some of the juicier tidbits, a lot of the Hollywood insider type info, a lot of stuff about the Satanism going on out there, and a lot of other things as well. So sit back, relax, and check this out. I think you're going to see that once I start reading this and once you start hearing this lady's experience, you're going to be able to connect a lot of this to a lot of the information you've seen throughout the years. It's very interesting stuff. If anything, this is going to fill in a lot of gaps that have been there for a very long time, because most of us are well aware of that satanic Hollywood system. But this lady's talking about things that happened in Hollywood all the way back 20 years ago and since then. She's covering a lot of territory here, so it's very interesting stuff. But another reason it really rang true to me personally is, and I've mentioned this in other videos and I think on some of the radio shows as well, but I worked out in Hollywood myself for many years. Now, I was a writer and I had an agent and all that, and I was always trying to sell stuff, but for work I was working in television, mainly in reality TV, and I worked in production, so I wasn't any kind of a big shot or anything. But I'll tell you this right now, if you want to hear the best Hollywood stories, the real Hollywood gossip, the stuff you're not going to see on like E! Entertainment TV or Bravo or any of those daytime talk shows, the best way is to know somebody that works in the industry in production, or to get out there and do it yourself. Because oftentimes these people have been out there for years and they've worked on movies and TV shows, and they've even been to a lot of the parties. Sometimes they've even dated some of these stars. So when you're working out there and you're with this peer group of people who are all trying to make it in the industry, you find the best stories, the juiciest stories, the wildest, craziest stuff. And to me, that's exactly what this video is going to be. This is a lady who put up a blog 5 years ago, decided to spill the beans on some things. No one really caught on to it, it seems like, but I don't think that mattered to her. She was just trying to put stuff out there. So without further ado, kick back, relax, and get ready for something very special, and most importantly, I think, mind-opening, enlightening. This stuff shines the light on a very, very dark industry. August 2010, Felicia G. I'd like this thread to be a place where anyone who has had first-hand experience interacting with celebrities can talk about what they've observed. This includes anything anomalous, which might speak to the idea of replacements, clones, synthetics, or even spiritual possession. Even if all you did was see someone perform live at a concert, or you attended a book signing or political rally, or maybe you had a random moment where you walked past a famous person, I'd love for you to post observations here. Also, I would love for people who have worked on stage professionally, or as a model, or in film or TV, or music video sets, to share any observations they might have had about weird things that make you go, the entertainment world is full of high strangeness. My own history comes as both a former actress, singer, and also a writer. Also, I'm just someone who has come across a lot of celebrities and people who work in show business as part of my daily life. Some of it comes from the area where I live, which is an artistic area where lots of celebs and artistic people chose to vacation or even retire. I think I only understood the idea of replacements being possible on an intuitive level for a really long time. Most of what I observed has to do with significant emotional, spiritual, and interpersonal changes that happen when people are presented with really big show business opportunities. Please understand something very important as you read this thread. At any given time, the members of the Screen Actors Guild are 99% unemployed, and there are many, many other actors who are non-union who are also working in the industry on and off, and they are also about 99% unemployed. For the years I worked as an actress, I was equity eligible, which at the time was a subcategory of stage performers who had worked on jobs earning equity minimum rates, but had never actually been hired in an equity show. At the peak of my acting career, I was making equity minimum rates, which in the late 80s, early 90s was $300 per week, and that was considered rich living in the acting industry, believe it or not. Most acting jobs last from 4 weeks to 3 months if you're doing a stage show, such as with a regional theater, dinner theater, or youth theater. That's part of the reason why the unemployment rates are so high. Jobs don't last very long because shows might have a run for just a few weeks. And then you have several weeks of rehearsals before that, so your entire work period might consist of a very short period of time. I did many different kinds of work, ranging from regional theater to Shakespeare in the Park type stuff to summer stock, kids theater, school tours, things like that. In between, I worked as much as possible doing things like voiceover work, live events like industrial work at auto shows as a spokesmodel, and TV and film bit parts. I was lucky to work steadily during the time I was a professional actress. I never took work as a waitress, for instance, to keep me going between jobs. I seemed to always have a gig going on. Most of my friends, in the meantime, made more as waiters and hostesses in restaurants and worked for 2/3 of the year in the restaurant industry. And many of them were a lot more talented than I was. Show business is just a brutal, brutal industry. In the stage world, which centers in New York, you have the gay mafia running things. Befriend this crowd and you will continually get work. Piss them off and you'll never work in this town again. I had written a play once that a former Broadway producer was looking at. She was a lesbian woman who had worked on several big-name Broadway musicals in the 1980s and 1990s. At one point, she pissed off some of the gay males who run the industry in New York, and she literally became homeless almost overnight from the blacklisting. She liked my play, but told me she couldn't really help me any further because all of her friends had turned on her. So to be clear, it is a gay male mafia that runs the theatrical world in New York. This makes for a very weird dynamic when you seek stage work in New York, as I did. Many gay males took to me because at the time I was pretty glamorous and looked like Jennifer Connelly or maybe Brooke Shields, a very popular look at that time. It got me a lot of work. When the rare straight male stage director auditioned me, it was always a casting couch situation. Sleep with me or you don't get work, and I always refused. So the only work I really got in the theater from my New York auditions was from gay male directors. Now on the flip side of things, if you were a gay man auditioning for work and a gay male director was casting, you also needed to be ready to sleep with the director. One of my friends was very willing and got a supporting role in a Broadway musical, but the show bombed, unfortunately. He didn't really care about sleeping with the director, he just thought it'd be kind of fun. Now I'm explaining the background here of the stage world. The stage is very different from TV and film, which I'll discuss here in a moment. Most of my steady work came from auditioning in New York for theaters that were out of town, so I traveled and did tons of work up and down the East Coast. A lot of the jobs were very fun, again because I worked for either gay male directors who admired me or straight female directors who simply cast me for my talent. Now I mostly did comedies and kids shows and period pieces like Shakespeare, with a few musicals thrown in. Stage work can be very beautiful because you get to project loving and positive energy to a crowd and attempt to share something uplifting or educational with the masses. All of the actors I knew were very sweet, and we all tended to be the typical right-brained creative types who were very idealistic and kind of naive about the world, and often very, very oversexed. Any cast I was in always became an orgy of almost everybody sleeping with everybody else. Where it got weird was when the power players, the producers and directors, would adopt a cast member as a lover. Then that person was usually elevated to a position of power. They suddenly took over the lead, for instance, with the original person suddenly not showing up for work, and no one knows why. I was fortunate to come from a loving family, but many of the performers and models I knew did not. When they came from abusive homes or single-parent homes, they almost always became more vulnerable to prostitution, abuse, and drug addiction in the industry. Some of it is driven by the very real harsh economics of working in that industry. Again, 99% unemployment, let alone trying to compete with a gazillion people who are prettier, more talented, and who have bigger boobs and skinnier bodies than you do. So from a director or producer's perspective, when you have thousands of gorgeous young men and women dying to get a part, why not have some hidden job requirements like sleeping with the director? If one woman refuses to do it, chances are there are hundreds behind her in line who will say yes, and that's the mentality. The problem is that young women often think that sleeping with the director means that they will be taken more seriously as a performer and get more access to meatier roles. It doesn't always work that way. I knew two actresses, one who was a comedian actress and the other one who was just an actress, and they were trying to make it in New York and were pursuing every option possible, knocking down doors, pounding pavements, all that. One of them ended up sleeping with this yucky comedian named Jackie Mason because he told her he would help her get live comedy gigs in the city. He did invite her to perform at one event, but that was it. She stopped sleeping with him pretty quickly, and the entire experience really darkened her, blackened her spirit. She went from this gorgeous Italian-American New Jersey comedian to this saddened, heavy-drinking, harsh-toned woman almost overnight. She told me he gave her drugs too, so God only knows what really happened. The other girl, the actress who was friends with the comedian, actually had a TV agent in the city who put her up for a minor speaking role on the TV series ER. This actress was told that she needed to sleep with, I think it was a casting director, not the episode director, and either way she did it, and she did get a small performing role. Her agent had basically operated as a madam, setting her up to sleep with the director to get the role. After the agent knew the actress was willing to go that route to get the work, she set her up to work as a full-time escort between acting jobs. The last I talked to this poor actress, she had descended into full-time prostitution because she wasn't getting auditions for acting work anymore. But her agent was sending her loads of Johns to sleep with at the same time. So many acting agencies are fronts for prostitution, escort services, S&M dungeon master stuff, and even worse. Joe Franklin, who had a late-night TV talk show in New York, was another one famous for getting young girls to sleep with him while making all these promises about how he had set him up in show business. And of course, it never happened for any of the women. It was always a setup. So when a lot of these men of power see all these gorgeous, talented, and often very sexual women pursuing jobs in New York, well, these guys take advantage. Now, I'm still talking about stuff happening on a relatively human level, man to woman. It's abusive, it's nasty, sure, but in some ways, it's a story as old as time. What I've talked about so far is what happens in the very lowest levels, the lowest tier of show business. This is where I was, where people were basically just working for a living, trying to keep themselves and their integrity intact, naive about the larger stuff going on for the most part. Some made bad choices, fell into prostitution, drug use, and even porn. Amongst the models, actors, and actresses I knew, this happened to a lot of them. And most of the people I personally knew well actually would stay at that level. They never really became famous or big. I did, however, have many first-hand brushes with celebs who were on a much higher tier, and weird stuff was constantly within these circles. Most open modeling casting calls are really prostitution fronts anyway, or they just force you to spend lots of money on unnecessary headshots, professional photography, and then the agency makes more from pimping and from the photos than actually getting the models work. At those open calls, they want really pretty and really dumb, submissive women. Very sad how such women are taken advantage of. As I mentioned in another thread, I do believe that there are two realities within the industry. The insider bloodline types who literally make a phone call after they get out of Juilliard or film school and they immediately get work in the industry. Or they've come from some multi-generational abuse type families. And then there are the nobodies like me who get work but don't have those connections. In my career, whenever I would cross slightly over into the reality of potentially getting bigger roles in TV or film, I was always presented with the pay-to-play prostitution demand, which I always refused. I kept thinking each time I hit that wall in various cities and various shows and film projects that surely at some point I would find a big role that didn't require that. But I never did. Casting directors, agents, and/or directors always made it very clear that you not only make yourself available to sleep with that specific power player, but most actresses are expected to be on call in what's basically a pool of prostitute escorts for other powerful people that particular person might know. Models also end up in this situation, only it starts very young for them. Since a model's career is usually over by 25, they start working at 13 to 16 years old and begin working as prostitutes from day one in addition to going on modeling calls. Because models also have to keep an extremely inhumanly thin physique, they are fed cocaine the very first time they're at a modeling shoot, usually, and this keeps them lively and bouncy for the photo shoot, lowers their sexual inhibitions, and makes them feel part of the adult crowd. I have lived on a property where many Ralph Lauren and other high-profile clothes catalog shoots have been held, in addition to many women's magazines shooting photo spreads there. Cocaine was handed out at the refreshment table much of the time. I usually showed up, grabbed a snack, and left. I couldn't believe how open the drug use was. The models were sickly thin, but looked great in those bulky clothes. So to cross into the higher echelons of entertainment, if you don't have family connections, you work yourself through the drug use, the sexual permissiveness, the prostitution. There's escort levels, and this in turn leads to things like mind control, having handlers, and into darker levels of what I believe is spiritual possession or even soul loss at a very profound level. At some point, if you wake up from the almost constant mind control and trance induction, and you say no, you can either be told you will never have a career, as happened to me before I got involved with this crap, or you could have your physical well-being threatened. I myself had some death threats from one assistant director who had chosen me to play a recurring character on a TV show. I did about 10 episodes. He was always inappropriately flirtatious with me in a really creepy way, and when I showed up one day with an engagement ring on my finger after getting engaged, he got really nasty. He threatened my boyfriend's life and mine. I couldn't figure out why. I was just a bit player, nobody famous, nothing really. He threatened my boyfriend's life and mine. I couldn't figure out why. I was just a bit player, nobody famous, nothing. I just laughed it off at the time, but I knew another girl who had gone the prostitution route on that very same show, and she actually slept with the same assistant director, which got her exactly 6 speaking lines in one episode, and she became creeped out by him really quickly. She talked about how he was violent with her during sex, always feeding her copious amounts of drugs, and talked about how the next time she'd come over, he'd make sure and bring over some of his friends from the set so they could all have some time with her. She refused and broke up with him after that, naively thinking that this was a relationship of equals. She moved back in with her ex-boyfriend, and that boyfriend had the tires shot out of his truck. She was also gang-stalked while out driving for months, and her agent would no longer return her phone calls for so-called unprofessional behavior. Now, of course, this unprofessional behavior was her breaking up with the assistant director. But again, though, I'm just talking about lower-level shenanigans in the industry right now, and I'll talk more about observing actual celebs next. I just wanted to provide more background on the thuggery, the mandatory prostitution, and the drug use that is constant in the TV and film world. And I really didn't see this in the stage world at all, so it seems more tied to the modeling, TV, music video, and film worlds. What I've described so far is really the grooming stage, which I believe later can set the stage for a performer, once they get famous, to become deeply embedded in a very dark world indeed. And having seen how dark it is, I can't help but see that there must be people who protest and wake up at some point. And I also see how their waking up must be a real threat to the controllers of this system. So of course they are threatened, silenced, and even killed. And that's the way the game works out there. It's awful. One TV show I did starred Carol O'Connor, and the show was haunted by problems. Parasitic drug dealers literally took up residence in the tiny Georgia town where we filmed, preying on the cast and the crew. Actor Howard Rollins had a major cocaine problem throughout the filming, and even Carol O'Connor's own son, Hugh. He had been given a small role on the show, so Carol could keep an eye on him. He was prone to drug problems, but he became a sitting duck for the drug pushers and sunk deeper into his drug addiction during the filming of the series. Some years later he died of an overdose, and the women on the show were so horribly skinny and coke addicted it was terrible. They keep the women of TV and film horrifically thin. I could see the ribs and backbones of the main actress, Anne Marie Johnson, and a guest star who was a woman from soap operas when they filmed a party scene wearing backless gowns. They seriously looked like refugees from a concentration camp, just like models. And neither of these women was large in any respect. They needed to each put on another 20 pounds just to be healthy. Many of the episode directors complained about how Anne Marie was getting too fat. Yeah, the residents of Dashu were so frickin' fat. What lard asses they were. What twisted people these were. Carroll O'Connor was always polite yet distant with everyone. Once in a while you'd see his famous humor come through in some improvising, some shades of Archie Bunker actually coming through. The show was very serious and dramatic and slow-paced. It was called In the Heat of the Night. I was struck by how Carroll O'Connor seemed smaller and frailer than he did as Archie Bunker, but I wrote it off as age. Plus, he had a heart condition, and the stress of having to film extra hours due to his co-star's drug problems added to that. At one point during production, he had a heart attack. Now, about a completely different celebrity, I want to tell you about a time that I was kicked off an alternative news conspiracy site some years ago for sharing the story that I'm about to share with you now. We all know Michael Jackson hadn't been Michael Jackson for a long time and was possibly replaced several times. And he came from a horrifically abusive family where his dad sold all of his children into bondage, basically. Many stories about how old Joe Jackson once kicked little Michael in the crotch so hard that it may have actually led to permanent damage to his testes. Other people used to speculate if that was the reason for his really high voice. Anyway, lots of mess going on there. The Being, who was masquerading as Michael Jackson around 1990-95, often rented out a suite at Leona Helmsley's The Palace luxury hotel. A friend of mine in the hotel industry took me to see this huge penthouse suite, which takes up 2 whole stories, and had an amazing view, beautiful grand piano, endless rooms. Now this woman who was the concierge there during the time Michael Jackson was staying there told me about how he would have groups of 10 to 15 Mexican boys, under the age of 15 typically, shipped in by a mysterious limo driver who would show up at the back delivery entrance and bring the kids in for play dates. Now Michael also always had Bubbles the chimp with him back in those days. The boys would stay over for a night or two and then be shipped back out again. My friend and all the staff used to dealing with VIPs knew that they would be blacklisted from working in the hotel industry in New York if they ever let word out about this. The rooms were always a mess afterwards, she told me. Semen stains all over the expensive couches. She showed me some of the specific couches that had to be replaced several times. Really, really nasty stuff. And she didn't want to tell me anything more, but suffice it to say that the insiders in the VIP hotel lodgings world see a lot of this stuff involved with child sex trafficking and sex slavery. And these people being shipped in for all these certain stars. The same goes for women sex slaves too. It all depends on the celebrity's tastes. Another hotel industry friend who worked in lots of LA hotels on the West Coast talked about Tom Cruise, and she said that he keeps to this day a very special luxury penthouse apartment for parties with his male gay friends and gay male escorts, some of them underaged. So there is a ton of this underground sex slave, prostitution, trafficking stuff that sits right alongside the drug industry, both with parasitic hands in the world of stars, celebs, and models. Are these the originals? Were the originals this goofed up? I don't know. The replacements do seem heavily indulged, though, if that's what they are. They get all the drugs and sex they want, plus loads of spending money, fame, attention. Cinematographers are also heavily into the dark stuff that is so pervasive in the film and TV industries. Through friends of a friend, I've had several conversations with a man who has been a main cinematographer on tons of mainstream hit films. He worked on Kill Bill with Uma Thurman and Quentin Tarantino and David Carradine. He described working on that set and his whole gleeful description of the constant immersion in blood. Fake blood, of course, one would hope. He also gleefully talked about body parts being tossed into scenes and other celebrations of carnage, and it really made me sick. And he just loved it, because he's a nasty piece of work. He described this weird affair between Uma and Quentin Tarantino and how he would sort of program her to do her scenes. The real Uma seems very different, quiet, low-key, nerdish, and even bookish. So definitely lots of programming and handling was going on there. Now, I've never been able to watch the movie. Tarantino's work is just such an openly satanic celebration of bloodlust. I really want to kill the bastard. This cinematographer has also worked with some major action directors like Michael Bay, who I'm convinced is not from here. He's just not human. I mean, go look at his eyes in the photos sometime. He's a weirdo. But again, this cinematographer only seems to work on these action, bloodlust, and bloodletting type movies. This guy, the cinematographer, was also a major creep who kept his wife at home. Then he'd go off someplace like China for 6 months and sleep with a second-tier actress and crew members who all worked on the set. And then he'd come home to this clueless wife. Now this happens all the time out there. And horrific all around, really. Sets pretty much operate as free-falling orgy zones. Married people suddenly become unmarried for purposes of filming, and then they go back to their significant others later. Michael Douglas did this for years to his long-suffering wife Deandra. Kathleen Turner recently confirmed this in her biography. The same thing played out in the earlier marriages of both Mel Gibson and Kevin Costner. Remember how for ages their publicists promoted them as these ultimate family men, still married to their longtime sweethearts, devoted dads, all that stuff? Well, now the truth is coming out about how abusive Mel is, and Costner's always getting caught sleeping around. It's such a creepy world. Don't believe any of this knight in shining armor spin about any star, male or female. And yeah, it's all right there in the pageant industry as well. I was in the Miss Teen Pennsylvania pageant back in the day. I think that is what it was called back then. And during the 3-day rehearsal period before the pageant, I was pretty much told by the production heads that I was being given a very favorable rating by the important people because I could sing, dance, I had good grades, etc. It was weird. It was like they were telling me in advance I was going to win. Not that the prize was much. I think it was just a couple of $1,000s. Anyway, as we headed into the dress rehearsal stage and were finalizing our performances for the show, one girl who was very sexually precocious and who had a really large rack on her started noticing how the judges and pageant directors were paying me a lot of attention. So she started kissing up to them. Well, she ended up actually winning the pageant. And I kept in touch with my roommates, 3 girls I had roomed with over the rehearsal weekend who were all contestants just like me. And one of them later told me that the girl who won had slept with one of the male production people. Pure coincidence that she happened to win? Of course. I mean, the girl was 16 years old, but she did look 22. So I hope she was okay after that and didn't sink into that horrible little sideshow world of larger national pageants. I also knew a former Miss Pennsylvania, a very clean-cut athlete type of a woman. She was Miss PA in the late 80s sometime. She talked about how at the national pageant it was all about who would be most sexually accommodating to the judges that weekend, before the final pageant show was held. She didn't win Miss USA, but after what she saw, she had no regrets at all. And you know about the now D-list actress Tara Reid? She of all the addictions and the crazy plastic surgeries. She makes her living earning about $20,000 to $50,000, at least back when she looked better, as a private escort to many wealthy international men. Because when you are a C or a D level celebrity female, you actually earn more as a prostitute than as an actress. And I guess the attitude of these poor, abused, mind-controlled women is, hey, at least it's a job. They call it per gig, which usually involves travel to be with the gentleman in question somewhere out of the country, at his estate, a private island, or a yacht, the usual stuff. Now, Pamela Anderson has been doing the same thing for a long, long time. She makes more, though. There are many, many actresses involved in this, and there's also plenty of actors involved in it as well. Now, many others like this one actress, Mina Savari. You may have heard of her, but she had made a really big splash in this movie called American Beauty. But in recent years, she had totally disappeared off the map. She's actually making loads of money as a dominatrix, catering to clients with certain, well, tastes. Now, a lot of this information concerning the actors and actresses who are actually involved in prostitution is not only gleaned from my own personal experiences, but also from a lot of my friends who work in the higher-end hotels in LA and Las Vegas. Since SAG minimum rates for a day-long gig used to be, I don't know what, $500 a day or something like that, I really have no idea what it is now. But minor stars might get $10,000 for a small walk-on role as the villain in a TV series. But it turns out that they can actually make way more consistent income doing the call girl stuff and call boy stuff, just whatever. In addition, many female celebrities got started in prostitution and later became stars. Or they worked in a few roles, their careers stalled, and then they went into prostitution, serviced the right client, and then their careers became bigger again. Case in point, Denise Richards, who was working as an escort when she got involved with Charlie Sheen. Her acting career never really took off, and she always had more work as a call girl than anything else. Paris Hilton was a notorious LA prostitute, and the only reason she ever became a celebrity was because she blackmailed certain highly placed entertainment people who were in her little black book. And that's how that horrible woman was foisted upon us all, and young girls especially, who for a while really looked up to her. But her arrest for cocaine the other night is more typical of what she's always been up to. Paris now makes between $500,000 to $1 million just to show up at a party for like the King of Bahrain's son and stuff like that. She does those international prostitution party appearance gigs all the time. There is also a big esoteric psychic ritual component going on in Hollywood. Depending on the wiring of the woman, she might be used to conceive a particular type of a soul during a ritual. She could be used as a breeder, and then suddenly the baby disappears. Also, there are sexual rituals, and they're usually used to bring energy to a person, a company, a project, an endeavor, or even to a location. Older women are often used to help a younger member, male usually, of a connected family celebrate his sexual maturity. You can think of it like a bar or a bat mitzvah ceremony, only instead of coming of age spiritually, he is celebrating coming of age sexually. This can be done when the child is between the ages of 12 or 15 for boys, and not too long after a girl's first period for the younger girls. You have the Madonnas out there who groom these younger women to eventually take their place with these sexual psychic rituals, but sometimes the older ones are still being used for other things too. It's never really been about youth, but more about the energy and being able to access that person to harvest that psychic energy, that emotional energy. And the women who have had a lot of sexual abuse and fragmentation and damage in their past, they're especially popular in this regard because they can be trained not to remember being abused, and they'll tend to dismiss everything as a great party in which they had great drinks and drugs and had sex with multiple people, and then they went home with lots of money. Pamela Anderson wrote a novel, I'm sure with a ghostwriter, but she wrote it a while back that talked about one of her alter egos and discussed these frequent orgies which she participated in. Thinly veiled real stuff. But I don't think that book talked about any of the deeper esoteric stuff going on. Again, with mind control and fragmentation, sometimes the person doesn't even recall everything they ended up being used for. I know a second-tier TV actress. She's like C or D-list movie actress, and she's done some story arcs on various crime and law type series, often as the long-suffering wife who turns out to be a killer, you know, that type of a thing. She usually films for 2 days, which is max after work, and since she has a little bit of a name, she can pull about $10,000 to $25,000 every time she gets a story arc like that. But still, she works rarely. Like most actresses her age, she's in her 50s now. If she had slightly more name recognition, she says she could probably make more for these types of gigs. But since she hasn't been in a mainstream movie for a while, her asking price keeps going down. She's someone who actually did not end up in the prostitution sex slave track. But then she took a long time off from the biz to get married. She had kids. You know, live a normal life away from LA and New York. And so she's a lot more of a character actress anyway than that type of a blonde, buxomed, impressionable sex kitten type, which actually probably saved her life. With some of these ladies, it's helpful to look at the constellation of people they've dated. How did Anne Hathaway end up engaged to wealthy real estate developer Raffaello Falleri, for instance? Here's some info on some of his connections from June 2008. It says, more trouble for Raffaello, the fiancé of Devil Wears Prada star Anne Hathaway. Attorney General Andrew Cuomo is investigating the Falleri Foundation, a charity headed by the 29-year-old Italian businessman. The Post has it that Cuomo's office has subpoenaed financial documents belonging to the Manhattan-based foundation, which is involved with vaccinating children in developing countries, among other things. Falleri last made headlines when he was arrested for bouncing a $215,000 company check issued on behalf of his own real estate company. Now, those charges were dropped when he paid up last month, and earlier this year he also settled a lawsuit brought on by billionaire Ron Burkle. Hathaway's spokesman tells the Post that the actress no longer serves on the foundation's board, though she had traveled to Central America with Falleri last year for a charity-funded vaccination program. Cuomo's office declined to elaborate on the investigation, but apparently it has something to do with the foundation's failure to file tax disclosure forms required of nonprofit groups. So with this fiance, you have a bunch of things going on. First off, when someone is in the industry like Anne Hathaway is suddenly engaged to a guy like that, it's almost always due to an arranged escort prostitution date. Now, people think it's just because famous and wealthy people meet at parties, but it is not. Think of Cindy Crawford and Richard Gere and how they said they met at a party. No, she was a paid escort for the evening. At the higher echelons, these women, especially the supermodels, are expected to keep the powerful men company. It's all a part of the deal. Sometimes it works out nicely and the woman actually enjoys being with the guy. She ends up with a full-time gig, if you will, as the real girlfriend or wife. And that's how you often end up with actresses marrying these directors. Or it's more cold and calculated. He gets a bit of expensive, famous, beautiful arm candy, and she thinks she's going to get lots of work because she's married to the director. But you see, it doesn't always work out that way. Many of these directors rarely use their wives in their actual films. Anyway, with Anne and Raffaello, you also have the constellation of Raffaello having done a business deal with the infamous Ron Burkle, who happens to be a billionaire friend of Bill Clinton, who is widely known to be a guy who loves procuring models and other willing women for Bill, as well as enjoying some on the side for himself. So these threads all interconnect. Also, you have the connection through Othello to some world charity vaccination program type stuff, with Anne having sat on the board of the charity and traveled to third world countries doing what they call, quote, good works. These organizations are usually fronts for prostitution, sex trafficking rings, and drugs, but they love to have someone wholesome like Anne as the face of the organization. Now, I'm not saying she knew about any of this stuff. She may have genuinely believed everything was on the up and up. Anne and Raffaello eventually broke up, but apparently she had let him take some naked photos and videos of her. And she was freaking out for quite a while, at least that's what the media was telling us. She was afraid that they were going to be released. Now that's exactly how the mainstream press always spins this stuff. She agreed to do some sort of porn photos and video for the guy, with the understanding that it would be only circulated amongst a connected group of his friends. But after she broke up with him, all bets were off, and she knew he might get nasty and circulate some of this stuff wider. So this press release makes it sound like these were just some innocent little photos and bids taken between a consenting couple. But that's not how it usually works. The actresses agree to do porn in exchange for all the perks of being with the rich guy, but with the understanding that they lose rights to that material if they break up with the guy. I think that Anne got lucky, or perhaps made some other concessions or deals, because the release of this material didn't completely spoil her industry image as the nice girl, but it looks like some of it is leaked to the net and is viewable online. There is a higher tier in the porn world of homemade stuff by gorgeous actresses and models whose boyfriends just happen to be directors, photographers, celebrities, or other connected people, and they get these exclusive access to these sex tapes or photos that these women do. I'm sure Raffaello passed Anne's stuff off to his friends like Ron Burkle did. It doesn't mean that it was ever going to be in wider release at the lower levels of porn distribution. This is the more exclusive stuff, just for the exclusive circles. I'm afraid that these are the same exclusive circles who probably have access to these snuff films and sacrifices that are filmed, and that many of the same people who end up being replaced might also have their deaths or torture filmed and circulated. I can't say that with 100% first-hand knowledge, but I have known people who survived sex trafficking, and that they say that snuff films are done when a sex slave, prostitute, call boy has gotten a bit too haggard or maybe worn out around the edges, past his or her sell-by date, and or have pissed off the wrong people. And there's a huge market in these exclusive, connected, and wealthy circles for that stuff. I think if we really want to know what happens to the people who get replaced, that such snuff films would unfortunately tell us more than we would ever want to know. About Melissa Joan Hart. She's been working in show business since the age of 4, and having starred in Sabrina the Teenage Witch for all those years, she's no doubt highly skilled at moving esoteric energy, mind control, and even hypnotic energy, and influence her young female fan base with whatever themes the producers, writers wanted to get across. Now, a lot of that is probably unconscious on her part. She's just doing what she's been trained to do. Her husband, Mark Wilkerson, is a bit of a puzzle, though. Very little info available on him, even though he has his band called A Course of Nature, which has had some minor hits. The two of them did name their first kid Mason Walter Wilkerson, which is interesting. Who uses Mason as a first name, unless it has some significance? Perhaps a nod to the Freemasons, I was guessing? My sense of the couple is that they are very good workers for the system. They represent the good guy, good girl platform. They are being used by the system, but might not be insiders themselves. Melissa is busy being a good breeder, though. Just had her second kid, I think. Keep in mind with the breeder women is that there are often children born between the pregnancies we hear nothing about. They're the ones that get donated or sacrificed. Kids who can move psychic energy as powerfully as Melissa no doubt can and will be highly prized. I also wouldn't be surprised if Melissa's own children, or at least one of them, don't get offered to the Star Machine when they are a little older. As expected, since I joined this forum, I've been getting a certain amount of unpleasant pushback for posting. And that's why I've sort of been posting in a burst. I'm going to probably have to go dark for a little while after my flurry of posting, but I'm sure you'll all understand why. I'm not even in the industry anymore, but the psychic attacks and the synchronistic real-time warnings have been kicking up again. This always happens when I start talking about real things. Some of you probably know me from past posts on esoteric-type forums and alternative journalism, conspiracy forums, where often an entire group of gang-stalking behavior starts kicking up when I piss off the wrong person. So it's not a lot of fun. Speaking as a former performer, I always had a very pure and spiritual component, a very genuine intention to spread love, light, and positive emotion through my work as an actress, a singer, musician, comedian, writer. Very early on I ran into the dark arts. There is literally a much more pervasive dark form of art that is ruled by the Illuminati, reptilian, negative ETs, demons, whatever you want to call these things. They're all pretty much the same group from what I've seen. I did tons of Julie Andrews, upbeat, positive type work, largely comedic, some of it kids theater, a lot of it musicals, most of it live stage work. It was only when I started auditioning for, say, David Mamet type plays, in which the women are always hardened and usually whores, that I started to see the bizarro universe that coexists in the arts next to the more innocent, love and light, having fun, making friends, trying to change the world crowd. Whenever I auditioned for the darker roles, I was always creeped out by the metaphysical components. A lot of negative energy is always attached to these directors, the casting people, the actors, the actresses. A theater in which that stuff is happening feels completely different than, for example, a nice little dinner theater out in the country where I portrayed a character in Camelot. The dark stuff definitely involves negative entities. Often these entities and energies that the performers welcome into their bodies is a form of willful possession. Remember Oprah Winfrey's book Beloved, which she did a while back? In interviews she talked about allowing herself to be literally possessed by a dark, unhappy spirit of a slave, so she could better play the role. This is what actors and actresses are encouraged to do, to become entirely disassociative and to allow something other to come in. About the Olsen twins from Full House. I don't have any first-hand knowledge of them. All I know is that the twins always creeped me the F out. Like they were possessed as very, very little girls, maybe? Then when the one Olsen twin just happened to own the apartment where Heath Ledger overdosed, and the massage therapist who found the body, hint, she wasn't a massage therapist but a hired sex worker, called the Olsen girl first instead of 911, that just seemed to be par for the course with them. Remember, the satanic blood sacrifice type feeling of Heath Ledger's death coming just as Batman was coming out? And how the whole morbid situation ended up creating huge box office receipts, not to mention a posthumous Oscar nomination for poor Heath? You think that was all manipulated in some way? Absolutely. It's all about looking at the connections that these people plug into. You'll find a lot of nasty and juicy stuff that way. As far as all the clones and synthetics, I'm not really sure exactly what is going on there myself. I do have a theory that sometimes horrific plastic surgery of the type that really is more mutilation than beauty improvement can sometimes be done as a form of torture to bring the star in line. I can't even look at some celebs like Mickey Rourke or Heidi Montag or even Ashley Simpson without thinking maybe the original is still in there, but were they tortured into shutting up or falling in line some way? So using extreme surgeries as a form of torture and abuse might happen long before someone is actually replaced, or maybe in place of the replacement. But then some real plastic surgery does take place, of course, to make replacements look like the originals too. So it all gets very confusing. Traditionally, a doppelganger is considered a double, either a physical being or a non-physical being, which mimics someone else in every way, to the point that people get confused as to who's the real one and who's the original. One of the most famous doppelganger stories was of Percy Bysshe Shelley, husband of Mary Shelley of Frankenstein fame. Not long before Shelley's death, his friends reported seeing him walking outside a window of the house, but it wasn't him because the real Shelley was somewhere else at the time. Since he died soon afterward, there were whispers that had been a doppelganger, which can often be said to be a harbinger of the original's death as well. If you travel at all in this world and happen to work in a field in which you're exposed to lots of strangers, you soon see that there are only a certain amount of body, skin, voice, and personality types out there. In my work as an actress, I'd regularly move to a new town, end up living in close quarters with 30 complete strangers, and get to be very close to those new friends during the time we'd work together on a show. But what struck me after a few years of doing this is that I was starting to see doubles everywhere. Certain types kept repeating themselves. Amongst gay men, for instance, I kept seeing repetitions of almost the exact same type of man over and over again. Very eerie when you've traveled to a new part of the country and the guy has a different name, but he sounds, looks, and acts exactly like someone you befriended months before in a different state or even on a different acting job. When you haven't traveled very much, you don't see this kind of a thing, but trust me, it is very real. So, that does mean that the frequency of natural physical voice and personality doubles is higher than you might think, unless you've traveled a lot and spent time with tons of strangers as a gypsy performer type like I have. Then I went on to do counseling for a decade and worked with thousands upon thousands of strangers, and I saw doubles all the time. These weren't just people who looked alike and talked alike. Their issues and problems, the dynamics they were experiencing in relationships, family, work, all of it repeated itself to a T. Anyway, there seems to be the good Jedis and the dark Sith Lords in the arts, and unfortunately the darker arts are being strongly celebrated these days. Actresses like Anna Paquin, who didn't have much of a career after her childhood nomination for Best Supporting Actress in The Piano, has had to turn to the dark side of art to get recognition again in her vampire TV series True Blood. There can be a lifelong process of trying to get a talented artist to turn to the dark forces. And after that happens, a lot of subsidiary dark stuff starts happening, involvement in arranged dates with powerful men or women in the industry, feeding the stars tons of drugs just to get them to disassociate and go along with the abuse, and then involvement in actual dark rituals and sacrifices, but more commonly sex rites, at least like in the beginning of Eyes Wide Shut. The negative gatekeepers need a certain amount of true artists, lightworker types who are more fueled by love and innocence, and sometimes such types are targeted to be moved to a higher level of the playing field, while at the same time keeping them surrounded by relatively nice handlers who don't really corrupt them, at least not yet. But it seems that everyone in the industry has to make the choice between corruption or getting out of the industry at some point. Drugs and alcohol and spiritual possession make it easier to say, screw it, I'll do anything to get a job. But a lot of people who try to make it okay within themselves end up the victims of replacement later on, because at some point they usually do protest or get what's called a big mouth, and give that one revealing interview or comment to the media that can get them into real trouble. So in conclusion, I just wanted to say that I didn't cover everything from her blog. Again, I'm going to leave a link underneath so you can go back there and check it out. She goes more into detail about cloning and doppelgangers and things like that. Most importantly, if you're not familiar with this kind of a subject and this is your first time seeing this kind of a thing, please understand this is just the tip of the iceberg in a lot of ways. A lot of this stuff is really going on. However, in all the years I've had of exploring this kind of stuff, this really is some explosive information. It's fantastic information because it lines up with a lot of the stuff I've seen throughout the years myself, and I'm sure a lot of you can relate to that as well. Ultimately, I hope that this video opens up your mind. I hope it opens up your spiritual eyes. Essentially, we are under attack at all times through the media. And you have to be aware of that. You've got to know that this truly is a satanic system, because these people running these industries, they're in it. They're all in. They fully believe. Not only do they believe in God and the devil, they've chosen his side. Well, anyway, folks, thank you very much for checking out the video. I'll talk to you later.
All right, that was a good readout by KJ. I'm gonna switch it to two things that I want people to remember, and we're gonna go through Illuminati Watcher. We're gonna go through Dave Chappelle, and why is
like ads.
this pertinent?
I don't.
You'll see, because
Previous.
Dave Chappelle ended up talking about Hollywood recently, end of 2017, and so two things that you want to keep in mind from what the blog was read from is 2010. That was posted. It was posted in 2012, but the actual post originated in 2010. At the 41-minute mark of that, when he was reading, there's a term called sell-by date for people in the industry. In 50 minutes, it's referencing Eyes Wide Shut at the beginning. So let's go ahead and watch the 40 minutes of Illuminati Watcher, and then I think 10 minutes of the second one.
It's hot in here suddenly, isn't it? I wonder where that heat came from. I wonder what happened to me. Where did I go for 12 years if I wasn't raped? Maybe there's something else going on. Maybe these rapes aren't even the worst of it. Wouldn't that be something? Wouldn't that be something?
Hello everyone, this is Isaac from IlluminatiWatcher.com. Dave Chappelle released a two-part comedy series on Netflix on December 31st, 2017, called Equanimity and the Bird Revelation. Even though he openly laid out a disclaimer about comedy being exempt from the political correctness going on in America right now, the media proceeded to blast him for being inconsiderate to transgender, sexual abuse victims, and so on. Many are currently laying out the framework to ask if he's gone too far. Now, there are two things that are curious here. One, I typically lean on the side of spreading awareness of sensitivities to, disenfranchised groups such as this. I feel only through the awareness can people actually change their views of the world. So when the media quickly bashed Chappelle and his new shows by taking many of these comments out of context, it seems that the more right-wing side of the conspiracy realm may have had a point here, because they're always talking about their agenda of how the media seeks to police our own conversations. Not to mention, comedy is a strange sort of practice that should be exempt from political correctness. It's just the way it is. If we can't laugh at something, then it has way too much power over us. Now, the second thing of curiosity here is that nobody is talking about how Chappelle reveals his reason for walking away from his $50 million contract with Comedy Central and going to South Africa, which the tabloids attributed to drug abuse, something he brings up on the show when he says that they claimed he was smoking crack. I'll cover this a bit deeper in a second, but I found it quite odd that the overall message is that we shouldn't watch or support Dave Chappelle because he's supposedly a racist, bigoted, misogynist, even though he repeatedly tells the audience that being mean is part of comedy and he doesn't seek to actually do harm here. He even says that if you listen to his show and you feel like beating up a transgender, then you should leave. Now let's talk about the first show. The first show it has an interesting choice for the title of the show. Equanimity is a state of psychological stability and composure which is undisturbed by experience of or exposure to emotions, pain, or other phenomena that may cause others to lose the balance of their mind. Now, we'll revisit this, but keep this in the back of the mind as we look at some of the common threads between these two shows. And if you've already seen the shows, you'll know that the final example he brings up on the second half with the Iceberg Slim prostitute story, that's an example of what he's talking about with a prostitute and her mileage and losing the balance of her mind. but we'll get into that in a minute. So he starts this first show by talking about how he needed to get out of the comedy game before things got bad for him, drawing comparisons to Kevin Hart's sex tape scandal. Now, this is the first joke in a 2-part comedy special, and he's already laying the groundwork for a higher level reveal, as well as the idea that there is a power held over these entertainers by those that are higher up in the industry. The next topic is about writing jokes in reverse, although I'm sure he's not talking about the reverse writing of Aleister Crowley that influenced the backmasking of heavy metal suicide messages. He says that he comes up with a punchline and then creates a joke to fit it. The direct suggestion I'm giving here is that Chappelle wanted to reveal a darker truth to Hollywood that he was a witness to when he had his supposed breakdown when he went to South Africa. That is the punchline. And this entire 2-part comedy show is the joke to support it.
And you know, I don't want to sound like a braggart saying this, but the real reason I want to stop is because I'm too goddamn good at it. I'm dope, nigga. No, I'm not even exaggerating. It's not exciting. Every night before I come out on stage, I'll be backstage I'm sure this is gonna go well. And it always does. I'm so good at writing jokes, and this is not even an exaggeration. I actually write jokes backwards. I will write a punchline with no particular setup in mind. I just put it on a scrap of paper, and I'll throw that scrap of paper in my fishbowl. I have a fishbowl in my house filled with random punchlines. And every once in a while, I'll shake the bowl, and I'll dig in there and just pull one out and see if I can make that shit work. And I picked one for this special. It's not an easy punchline to pull off. Are you ready? Yeah. Here it goes. The punchline is, so I kicked her in the pussy.
Now, Dave Chappelle, he talks about transgender ideas, oversensitivity, and political correctness, and how these new attitudes are driven by rich white men, because historically nobody has cared about what women or black people think, so it's almost transparent that there is some kind of agenda at play here. Chappelle goes into the two-party system of politics, and how he voted for Clinton begrudgingly after she removed Bernie from the election. When he was in line to do early voting, he realized that poor white people were mistakenly thinking Trump would be fighting for them, but in reality, Trump was fighting for rich people like Dave Chappelle. Chappelle talks about the deception from the media in making us believe the extreme left and right are the norm, when in reality, we're all closer to the center. This is one of the main points I've been trying to convey in my works, because they are doing psyops to divide us and keep us distracted while they pursue their own agenda.
This man needs to realize that we all need each other. And that's why we will never, ever be able to beat China. Because everybody in America is racist, and everybody in China is Chinese. This motherfucker called it all wrong. And don't believe the media either, because as all this shit is happening, the media is trying to make us believe that the extremities amongst us are the norms. We can disagree, that's fine. And most of us are keeping a cool head about this shit. You know what I mean? Americans generally respect one another's beliefs, even if they don't share those beliefs. I know I do. I respect everybody's beliefs, except Amish people.
Now, the second part was called The Bird Revelation, and it starts out with a quote from jazz musician Charlie Parker, which is most likely where the bird term comes into play, since he was called Bird in his day. Chappelle says the jokes sound mean, but they're not intended that way, which is ironic and almost a little bit of a foreshadowed understanding of what was going to happen, since the mainstream media completely took his joke about Louis C.K. out of context.
Sometimes the funniest thing to say is mean. You know what I mean? It's a tough position to be in. So I say a lot of mean things. But you guys gotta remember, I'm not saying it to be mean. I'm saying it because it's funny. And everything's funny till it happens to you.
Revelation.
Chappelle talks about Louis C.K.'s sexual improprieties and how the woman who then gave up her dreams of comedy had a, quote, brittle spirit. He then goes into COINTELPRO, which is a subject I discussed in my hip-hop conspiracy book, Sacrifice Magic Behind the Mic. He is telling us that there's an actual coordinated agenda by pointing to real examples here.
I can't tell. This is like where it's hard to be a man. One lady said, Louis C.K. masturbating in front of me ruined my comedy dreams. Word. Well, then I dare say, madam, you may have never had a dream. Come on, man, that's a brittle spirit. That is a brittle-ass spirit, nigga. That shit is too much. This grown-ass woman. You know what this shit is like? It's like COINTELPRO. You know what that is? It's a program that the FBI had under J. Edgar Hoover. In this program, one of the many things they did was they would track the sexual habits of anyone they considered an enemy of the state. It was a lip button. That's why they got all these fucking sex tapes with Martin Luther King fucking bitches. But lucky for us, he actually had a dream. You think if Louis C.K. jerked off in front of Dr. King, he'd be like, I can't continue this movement. I'm sorry, but the freedom of black people must be stopped. I didn't know this nigga was gonna pull his dick out and jerk off like this. I just thought we were gonna get a couple of drinks and chill.
The higher point he is making is that Hollywood has a gauntlet of things to navigate, and it's not for the faint of heart. Furthermore, he talks about the extra struggles it takes to be a black man in America throughout the last 400 years. He then jokes about the brittle spirits of white America who can't tolerate the national anthem and the kneeling protest. He proceeds through with similar thinking and talks about an orgy where he was like Tom Cruise, and jokes about ruining it when everyone gets quiet, which is a reference to Eyes Wide Shut. This will come up again here shortly. He then makes a revelatory statement about the system being corrupt and how we need to give people in the system a place to be vulnerable and tell us what they did as part of the system.
I was right once. Remember that? Does anybody remember when I was like missing from show business for 12 years? Remember when I had like this really popular show and I quit? I remember I walked away from $50 million. A lot harder than walking away from Louis' freckled dick. I didn't know that I'd ever work again. And yet here I am tonight. Did my dream die? No. I remember that shit. You don't remember that when I quit my show? Remember I went on the way out the door, I said, something's wrong in Hollywood. I believe they said I smoked crack. That's right, I remember. Remember they called me crazy. So really, you know, you're right, ladies. Congratulations. Enjoy it. And they're coming for you, bitches. They're coming for you. One person that's uncomfortable, you know who's the most uncomfortable motherfucker in the room? The nigga that's right. I was right at an orgy once. Nobody fucked me. I was just walking around like Tom Cruise at the movies, just looking. And ruined the whole orgy by accident. It's easier to ruin an orgy than you think. All you gotta do is wait for it to get kind of quiet and then go, ew. And I feel bad. But I just feel like this is all happening for a reason. And ladies, I want you to win this fight. 10 years ago, I might have been scared, but you know, I got a daughter now, so if you win, she wins. So I'm rooting for you. And I agree with you. At least ideologically, I do. I don't know if you're doing it just right, but I mean, who am I to say? I don't think you're wrong. I just think that you can't make a lasting peace this way. You got all the bad guys scared, and that's good. But the minute they're not scared anymore, it will get worse than it was before. Fear does not make lasting peace. Ask black people. And that's what it is. What this city really needs, without irony, I'll say this, the cure for LA is in South Africa. You motherfuckers need truth and reconciliation with one another. Because the end of apartheid should have been a fucking bloodbath by any metric in human history, and it wasn't. And the only reason it wasn't is because Desmond Tutu and Mandela and all these guys figured out that if a system is corrupt, then the people who adhere to the system and are incentivized by that system are not criminals. They are victims. And that the system itself must be tried. But because the how systems work is so compartmentalized as far as information, the only way we can figure out what the system is if everybody says what they did. Tell them how you participated. Because men want to help, they're just scared. Because Ben Affleck tried to help. Hey, what happened to these ladies is disgusting. Oh, nigga, you grabbed a titty in 95. All right, fellas, I'm out. Fuck that, I ain't helping. I just want to help. I want to be a good guy. Like, I can't even say the word Me Too anymore. The nigga tonight was like, Dave, I'm going to the comedy club. I was like, I am also going to the comedy club.
Now, what's very curious is that Dave Chappelle talks about a sudden heat in the room and asks where the crowd thinks it came from. And I'd like to offer the suggestion of the devil. But then he goes into the scope of his disappearance.
It's hot in here suddenly, isn't it? I wonder where that heat came from. I wonder what happened to me. Where did I go for 12 years if I wasn't raped? Maybe there's something else going on. Maybe these rapes aren't even the worst of it. Wouldn't that be something? Wouldn't that be something? You can go ahead and go to the bathroom, Brooklyn. You don't need to hear this shit.
Now, the final analogy is about the illusory world of Hollywood and the real darkness within it. He's presumably the prostitute who is in his last bit of mileage before he snaps. They may have put on a clever show of sacrifice or death, much like we see in Eyes Wide Shut when Tom Cruise's character witnesses the ritualistic sacrifice at the mansion. They then let Chappelle believe he was responsible for something bad, and they tell him that they can keep it a secret together. After this, they can squeeze some more work out of him. The idea is that perhaps Hollywood has a clever illusion they use to trick people into doing their bidding, which raises a question of what precisely their bidding is, sexual or otherwise. If Chappelle is part of a cunning ruse, then he's still afraid to speak about it. Throughout the special, he's practically begging for the masses to change their attitudes towards people that have been a part of the system's game, with an example being Ben Affleck and the show. He wants to create a safe environment so he can share his story and help bring down the bigger system.
Sometimes I wouldn't talk about where I went, but y'all don't even want to know. I was gone for a long time, nigga. I was in the upside down. Scary being a white dude now, isn't it? A little bit, no? Well, you're not gonna get me too. But you know what I mean? It's funny for a black dude to see white people go through this because this is how it always is for us. All my heroes is either murdered by the government or registered sex offenders. Sad, I know, man. If I can see it. It's okay, my career ended many years ago. Order. No, I'm terrible. I'm terrible. I'm sorry, everybody. I'm sorry. You want to know what happened to me? Yeah. No. It's tempting, but I don't want to talk about it. Maybe at the end, when I run out of things to talk about. Actually, I'm almost there. I'm just trying to tell you what happened to me was not, I just didn't have a good go of it. I don't know what you guys think happens when you quit a successful show like this. I'll tell you what doesn't happen. They don't go, hey, well, good luck with your future endeavors. That's not what happens. It was cold out there. For real, I had to watch it all go down without me. I had to watch all those people do my show, Key and Peele and Amy Schumer and Mind and Mencia. Well, I'm not going to say they were doing my show. I'm just saying they were awfully similar. I was mad. And people would come up to me on the street and be like, yo, nigga, just every once in a while. Most people thought I was crazy, but sometimes people come, yo, nigga, you did the right thing, man. You my hero. Nigga, I don't want to be your hero. I want to be rich. Never choose to be a hero, because heroes die uncomfortable deaths. All I wanted to be was Paul Revere. I just needed one heroic moment, you understand? Paul Revere's ride was only one night. And then 40 years of him being like, hey, y'all, remember that time everybody was asleep and I was up and the British was coming? Boy, it's a good thing I was awake, nigga. Everybody be dead. That's why I want to start a GoFundMe for Colin Kaepernick. I do, man. I'm fascinated with him. I want to make sure he never has to play football again. He can if he wants to. I just don't want him to have to. Because why the fuck not? I know he's rich and people will be like, I'm not giving a GoFundMe to a rich dude, but you should. You should. Because that motherfucker's life was going great. He's so light-skinned, he didn't even have to say he was black. And yet, he took a knee during that anthem for us. Thought about us when things were going good, when his belly was full, when he didn't think about his livelihood or any of that, and they took his livelihood away from him. I'm like, man, that shouldn't be the way it is. Every fucking person that takes a stand for somebody else always gets beat down, and we watch it. Over and over and over again, we watch it. But we should pay those motherfuckers for blowing the whistle. Because they make our lives better. And we could change the narrative. We could make one motherfucker have a good outcome for doing the right thing. And that would make another motherfucker be brave enough to do the right thing. And if you did that, the niggas like Harvey Weinstein wouldn't rape for 40 years because bitch want a stupid-ass part. We should take care of each other. Wouldn't it be nice to be like, remember that time they was gonna kill Jesus, but then he got all that money? Real talk, man. It's not a racial thing. It's about us making our society better. It's about like even these women that are coming forward and they will say they're brave, and many of them are, and a few of them sucked the dick and got buyer's remorse. Yo, that's a huge omission from this narrative. This wouldn't have gone this far if some women weren't willing to do it. You can't ask every woman to hold the line. Some women can carry things heavier than others. So we should fight for one another. We should forgive the ones of us that are weaker and support the ones of us that are stronger. And then we can beat the thing. You guys keep going after individuals, the system is going to stay intact. You have to have men on your side. And I'm telling you right now, you're going to have a lot of imperfect allies. I'll tell you what happened, but I can't say it directly. There's a book, to me, that encapsulates my entire experience before I left the show. And the book is called Pimp. It's written by a guy named Iceberg Slim. Here, bring it up here. This is Matthew. Matthew is from France. He's white. And yet, he has an original copy of this book written by a black American who was a pimp in the 40s. Iceberg Slim, his real name was Robert Beck. He got the name Iceberg because he was in a bar in Chicago and there was a shootout in the bar and a bullet went through this nigga's hat and he still finished his drink. Pimps love shit like that. They said, man, you ice cold. And he said, I like that. And it stuck. This book is so heavy in the front, it has a glossary of pimp terms because the ideas are so foreign to the American ears. For instance, do you know what the phrase mileage on a hoe means? Of course you don't. Mileage on a hoe is a very wild concept. It means that pimps understand there's a finite amount of bad shit a person can do before they'll lose their fucking mind. And a good pimp can look at a woman that he's never seen before and call it, she's good for 500 fucks. That's her mileage. Anything over that, that bitch is gonna spill. They do it to you. Why the fuck you think most of us work from 9 to 5? Because 9 to 6 might kill a bitch. Iceberg Slim was the one that broke down what a bottom bitch was. Does anyone know what a bottom bitch is? Anyone? What's a bottom bitch, sir?
It's your prostitute that's the best out of all of them, that brings in the most money.
That's right. That's exactly right. Are you black? That's right. A bottom bitch is a pimp's number one hoe. She's even a bitch that helps him keep the other bitches in line. I will repeat. She's even the bitch that helps him keep the other bitches in line. If the pimp was McDonald's, and the bottom bitch is French fries. The rest of them bitches is like fish sandwiches and cherry pies and shit like that. Iceberg Slim breaks down some of the coldest capitalist concepts I've ever heard in my life. He describes in detail how these men break women so that they will give them the money that they make with their own bodies. There's a story in here so cold it makes me shudder to think about it. Well, Iceberg Slim is trying to control the woman that he finds uncontrollable. So he asks older pimp how he can rein her in. And the older pimp says, oh, that's easy, Iceberg. All you have to do is beat that bitch with a coat hanger and then run her a bath and give her some pills. She'll be so grateful that you fixed her that she'll forget you were the motherfucker that beat her in the first place. That's some cold shit. Now, at the end of this book, Iceberg Slim tells a story. It's kind of the crescendo of the book. And in the story, Iceberg Slim's bottom bitch is at the end of her mileage. If she was good for 500 fucks, she was at 498. She was bubbling. You could see it. She was going crazy. She started saying all kinds of shit. Oh, I always wanted to be in circus. Circus, this bitch is loose. I can juggle too, you know. Juggle. He had to let her go. It's hard to let her go. A bottom bitch go. And he wasn't ready to let her go because his organization couldn't handle losing her. But she didn't know that. She didn't know how important she was. So what he did was he called her to a diner. He said, look, bitch, you and I gotta part ways. She said, fine, motherfucker. I don't need you anyway because I know somebody at Ringling Brothers. She's like, all right, bitch, whatever. I got one last trick for you. It's a big money trick. You do this for me, you get paid, I get paid, and we go our separate ways. She said, fine, motherfucker, what do you want me to do? He said, okay, there's a guy in that hotel across the street. He's waiting for you in room number 7. I want you to go over there and I want you to fuck him. But before you do, I need you to put some of this stuff in his drink. And then he's gonna fall asleep. When he does, there's a briefcase on his bed. bring the briefcase to me. That's the trick, bitch. Can you handle it? She said, fuck yeah, I can handle it. And I can't wait to get rid of you. And then she ran outside, jumped on a unicycle and pedaled across the street. An iceberg watched her. He was like, man, she's pretty good. Man, if I never jerked off in her face, maybe she would have been in the circus right now. And she runs up to the motel steps and she disappears in room number 7, and she's gone for a real long time. Real long time. So long, in fact, that Iceberg got a little worried. But then, suddenly, she came back. He said, what's going on, bitch? Where's the briefcase? She said, I didn't get it, Daddy. He said, what do you mean you didn't get the briefcase, bitch? What's wrong with you? She said, oh, I did everything you said, but that man don't look right. Something wrong, Daddy. He said, what do you mean something's wrong, bitch? Did you put that stuff in his drink? She said, I did everything you said, Daddy. I put all of it in his drink. He said, wait a minute, bitch. Wait a minute. You put all of it in his drink? Now he had to see for himself. So the two of them go across the street to the motel, and they go into room number 7, and on the bed, laying lifelessly, is the white man that she was supposed to fuck. And Iceberg said, you right, bitch, she don't look good. What the fuck? So he called a friend of his that was a doctor that was close by. And the doctor came in, gave the guy a thorough examination, and told them both what was obvious. Slim, this motherfucker is dead. Oh, God, Daddy. Oh, no. Oh, no, we killed him. He said, calm down, bitch. We didn't do anything. You killed this motherfucker. And then he reached under the bed and he grabbed the briefcase. He popped it open. It was filled with money. More money than any of them had ever seen. And Iceberg took a little bit of the money and gave it to the doctor, and the doctor left discreetly. All right, bitch, let me think. I can fix this for you. I know somebody I can call. But if I call him, I'm gonna owe these motherfuckers a big favor. Oh, God, Daddy, please. I don't want to go to jail. Neither do I, bitch, so will you shut up? She picked up the phone. She heard him mumbling in the phone a little bit. He hung up the phone, and she was pacing the room, and he was just standing there cool, and they were waiting, and then suddenly, a van pulled up downstairs. 2 guys get out with a carpet. They walk upstairs. They roll that carpet out on the floor. They throw the body in the carpet. They roll that motherfucker up like a burrito. They pick that shit up and they throw it in the back of the van. They come back up and Iceberg opens the briefcase again and gives them a little money. He says, I'll get in touch with you guys later. They say, you're not gonna get in touch with us at all. We'll find you. He said, whatever, nigga. And they bounced. Oh, God, Daddy, oh, God. He says, relax, bitch. Listen, we getting the fuck out of here. You go downstairs, you get the car. We gotta leave separately. She went, she got the car. Iceberg grabbed that briefcase, waited a few minutes, looked out the window, and then he went down with her. They both got in the car, and they drove off. She was a blubbering mess. Oh, you did all this shit. He said, I told you, bitch, we didn't do anything. You killed a motherfucker, and I cleaned him up. And now we got us a secret, okay? Now, I know I'm not gonna tell, bitch. It's you? Oh, no, I ain't gonna tell. He said, all right, baby, cool. I'm gonna need you to stay with me for a while till this shit cools down. She goes, okay. That's the game. That's how the whole shit works, ladies. You understand? This bitch was at the end of her mileage. She was at 498. She ended up tricking for Iceberg for another 6 months. She must have turned another 200 tricks for him. Do you understand? That's some cold shit. And the cold shit about it is that the dead guy on the bed wasn't even dead at all. This motherfucker was just a friend of Iceberg's acting like he's asleep. The doctor wasn't a doctor. It was a motherfucking butcher that happened to have a white coat. And the dudes who came in the moving van clothes was dressed like movers because they were movers. Iceberg had gotten a new apartment. And the bag of money was Iceberg's money in the first place. The money he got from all those women. That's a cold game. That's the motherfucking capitalist manifesto. And that's why I went to South Africa. So now we got us a little secret, bitch.
And see. So what are my thoughts on this? Well, go back to the mid-2000s when Dave Chappelle was on Inside the Actor's Studio. On it, he was talking about how Hollywood was treating him like a prostitute. He said, "I would go to work on the show and I felt awful every day. That's not the way it was. I felt like some kind of prostitute or something. If I feel so bad, why keep on showing up to this place? I'm going to Africa." Now, this was also the same show where he talked about Hollywood and their ability to break down powerful men like Martin Lawrence and Kevin Hart by making them wear dresses and become more effeminate. Now, since the media can't get past the political correctness or lack thereof, I'm left scouring through Reddit forums to see if anyone has any ideas on how to decode Chappelle's secret. Some draw analogies to the Bible's Book of Revelation and the links between Babylon and Hollywood, which may be a good start. But here's what we do know. Chappelle alludes to something darker going on in Hollywood than rape. He couldn't be more clear on this. He titles his first show Equanimity because he himself was psychologically impacted from what he either saw or took part of. He also alludes to the room getting hot and makes a point to ask where the heat came from.
It's hot in here suddenly, isn't it? I wonder where that heat came from. I wonder what happened to me. Where did I go for 12 years if I wasn't raped? Maybe there's something else going on. Maybe these rapes aren't even the worst of it. Wouldn't that be something? Wouldn't that be something?
Note that this final show was filmed in Los Angeles, which is ground zero for this entire idea. Now, when he says that the room gets hot, we could possibly talk about, demonic ideas or the devil. But he makes a couple references to Eyes Wide Shut and Tom Cruise's character in the show, which we all know is the film that revealed too much and allegedly got Stanley Kubrick killed for showing off too much of the Hollywood deception, as decoded in my Kubrick's Code project. Now, from a higher perspective, it seems that one of his main objectives is to warn about too much political correctness. He assures us that it's not because he doesn't like these groups, but rather because it's a distraction tool being used by elite whites in the Illuminati. At least that's how I read it. He is doing this because he wants to give himself and others a place to share the secrets they've been a witness to, as well as a part of. Now, what are these secrets that are so horrid that he feels he can't share them? Blood sacrifice. His final plea for what happened to make him go to South Africa is analogous to Iceberg Slim's pimp book, and an example where the pimp gets inside the head of a prostitute and makes her believe she killed a man. He then manipulates her into putting a few more tricks in long after her mileage has expired. Chappelle was the prostitute, and he was deceived into taking part of a blood sacrifice, which may or may not be an illusion. I believe this because of the actions taken at Bohemian Grove on an annual basis. For those that aren't familiar with this event, it is an elite boys club that meets annually to conduct a cremation of care ceremony where they do a mock sacrifice of a child to a giant owl god, which has been called Moloch, but more accurately would be described as Minerva. I talked about this concept as it relates to the death of Drake's friend in September 2017. Now, if I was to take a guess at what Chappelle has been trying to tell us, it would be that people high up in the entertainment industry take practice in mock, or worse, for real, blood sacrifices of human beings. Throughout the comedy show, he puts down the people that spoke out about sexual improprieties and said they had brittle spirits. Now, he says this because he was a witness to something much darker and walked away from $50 million. He's saying that people in entertainment keep their mouth shut because the amount of fame and fortune is far too great. But he overcame that. He actually walked away. The people that are claiming sexual abuse are still inside the machine and benefiting from it. And if they wanted to truly make a difference, they should walk away like he did. Now, that's just my take on it. If you have any other ideas on it, please comment below. Is my theory right? Do you have any other ideas? To me, it seems like we have to rely on each other to explore these things because the mainstream media will continuously let us down and push the agenda that seeks to divide us and keep us trapped inside the hamster wheel. Now, if you want more, I've got a podcast, the Conspiracy Theories and Unpopular Culture podcast. I've got a website, IlluminatiWatcher.com, and I've got a Patreon support system on patreon.com/IlluminatiWatcher. And hey everyone, this is Isaac from IlluminatiWatcher.com. Previously, I wrote an article on Dave Chappelle's latest stand-up and the not-so-hidden messages of Illuminati blood sacrifice within Hollywood, which explained why he left a $50 million contract. I also had an accompanying video that went viral. I will post a link to that at the end of this video. Thanks to those that did watch that and all of the comments. The video and article are still available to review if you are unfamiliar, so please do so. Assuming that you are caught up with the theory, let's dive a little bit deeper by going into the past. Several years ago, I created a project called Kubrick's Code. Now, this was a combination book and video that detailed the running theme of Stanley Kubrick's main films, 2001: A Space Odyssey, A Clockwork Orange, The Shining, and Eyes Wide Shut, his final film. The idea is that Stanley Kubrick was familiar with the practices of the Illuminati from his time working with the high-profile people in Hollywood. Some claim that they funded his first major film, 2001: A Space Odyssey, in exchange for his ability to film the faked moon landing. Note that the two events were conducted around the same time in the late 60s. So, Kubrick's final film, Eyes Wide Shut, infamously showed the inner workings of the sexual orgy parties at Tom Cruise's character as he crashed the, party at the Somerset Mansion. All the attendees were wearing masks similar to those found at the Hellfire occult clubs of the 18th century. This is the same occult club that Benjamin Franklin was a member of. Now, this mansion scene was supposedly trimmed down quite heavily after Kubrick's death because it showed too much. The mansion sex party featured a master of ceremonies named Red Cloak and a reverse black mass. All of these relate to the Illuminati and occult practices, as I discuss in my book, Kubrick's Code. Now, of importance here is the sacrifice of the goddess Semiramis. Towards the end of the mansion scene, Tom Cruise's character gets caught, and a woman steps out to be sacrificed in exchange for letting him go. Red Cloak reluctantly accepts the sacrifice of this goddess, and Tom Cruise's character, Bill Harford, leaves the house. Now, he can't shake this memory. He decides to investigate it the next morning, and he finds out in the newspaper that a woman named Amanda was found dead from an overdose that night. Now, if you haven't seen Eyes Wide Shut, Amanda is also known as Mandy, who was the prostitute from the first party of the film at Ziegler's house. She is the same as the sacrifice goddess from the mansion as well. These are all related to the triple goddess Illuminati sacrifice that I go through in the book. Furthermore, Amanda, or Mandy, the sacrifice goddess Semiramis, she was dating Red Cloak, played by Leon Vitali, who, as I assert in the book, is closely connected to Aleister Crowley. This newspaper article that Tom Cruise's character reads says, "She has many important friends in the fashion and entertainment worlds, and she believed she'd break through in the end. It was just a matter of time." Now, this is obviously what happens in the industry when people are willing to sacrifice everything in order to make it. And Dave Chappelle was apparently not ready for that. Now, going a bit deeper, Bill keeps investigating and goes over to Ziegler's house upon Ziegler's request and finds out that Ziegler was actually at the Somerset Mansion orgy because he wasn't aware of this. After some haranguing, Ziegler says, "Who do you think those people were?" And that if he told them who they really were, he wouldn't sleep well at night. Now, this is Kubrick telling us that he would have had a similar reaction if we understood how deep the rabbit hole really went. Now, here's what's curious, because if you watched my first video on Dave Chappelle's stand-up, The Bird Revelation, you'll find that these are the exact same languages being used, because Ziegler tells Bill Harford, "Suppose I said that all of that was staged. It was a charade. It was fake." And Bill asked why they would do it, and he said it was just a way of keeping Bill quiet about where he's been and what he's seen. But then Bill pulls out the New York Post article about Mandy, and this is where Ziegler admits that she was indeed the woman at the party that died. And after some back and forth, he reiterates the mainstream media type lie and says, "It was only a matter of time. You even said it yourself." Ziegler then threatens Bill to keep his mouth shut, and he goes back home. Now, if you recall from Dave Chappelle's analogy from the Iceberg Slim book Pimp that he provides at the Bird Revelation, it becomes clear that these two examples tell us the same exact thing. Hollywood has a way of blurring reality and subjecting its aspirants to some form of blood sacrifice ritual that may or may not be real. Either way, it's too scary to doubt, and people like Dave Chappelle find it more comforting to simply leave. That is precisely why $50 million wasn't enough. Now, I'm going to play the clips from Eyes Wide Shut that I'm talking about. Note that this is like 11 minutes, and also if you're watching this on YouTube, I had to block the actual video. I will try to leave the bottom of the screen available for the closed captions. It's important to watch it. It's kind of long, but it's 11 minutes, and then after that, I will wrap things up with my conclusion on what more we can learn from this and why we're seeing this. Now, in conclusion, the idea of prostitution rings or ritual child abuse or even blood sacrifice are echoed in other shows like True Detective, which are based on real events, unfortunately. The events at the cremation of care ceremony at Bohemian Grove are also allegedly about the sacrifice of a child. And what are all these related to? They're related to the ancient pagan cultures that used to sacrifice children to the Moloch deity. So you see this theme run through various examples. Neon Demon also is a movie where they show cannibalism in Hollywood and harvesting a young person's energy. Now, Dave Chappelle is warning us that he is much like Tom Cruise's character from Eyes Wide Shut. He even directly says he was playing the same exact role as a joke about ruining an orgy. I'll play that clip now.
I remember that shit. You don't remember that when I quit my show? Remember, when on the way out the door, I said, something's wrong in Hollywood. I believe they said I smoked crack. That's right, I remember. Remember they called me crazy. So really, you know, you're right, ladies. Congratulations. Enjoy it. And they're coming for you, bitches. They're coming for you. One person that's uncomfortable, you know who's the most uncomfortable motherfucker in the room? The nigga that's right. I was right at an orgy once. Nobody fucked me. I was just walking around like Tom Cruise at the movies, just looking. And ruin the whole orgy by accident. It's easier to ruin an orgy than you think. All you gotta do is wait for it to get kind of quiet and then go, ew.
What he's trying to do is he's trying to make a safe place for people like him to tell the masses about the horrific things that he's seen or even taken a part of. At the moment, our culture is far too accusatory and has this sort of high and mighty condemnation sort of attitude of judging everyone. So Chappelle tells us that we need some imperfect allies if we want to make this thing better and give people like him a place to come out and, admit the things that they've seen or even taken a part of. Now, if you want to learn more about the Kubrick mystery and the enigma, pick up my project called The Kubrick's Code. It's available on audiobook on audible.com, Amazon.
All right. I left the links for Illuminati Watcher. He does some good stuff. I need to kind of shut it down for a little while. If no one's doing a show, I'll go ahead and do an open topic. Anything goes. Maybe an hour or hour and a half. We'll see. So pretty much, we're revisiting Hollywood from 2010 from someone who was an insider, and that was the initial part. Segued into Dave Chappelle, who he tells a story of the pimp and mileage on a hoe is the term that was used, but in the blog It mentions Sell By Date and also Eyes Wide Shut, in which where Dave Chappelle also mentions Eyes Wide Shut. Eyes Wide Shut, and also Illuminati Watcher did it. There's also a couple of other people who do a good breakdown of Eyes Wide Shut and the occult symbolism, things like that. But yeah, there's a lot of crazy, shady shit going on in Hollywood. But what we get is we get one person or two, you know, a couple of guinea pigs, I guess, whatever you want to call it, scapegoats, and Hollywood keeps going. Everybody's like, okay, we got those perverts out, you know, they're not going to get any more movies, you know, at least for another 5 years. Then you'll see him come back. It'll be all fine. Just kind of like Charlie Sheen, whatever. It's okay. Yeah, that's how it is. But in order for it to come all down, break down, and fall apart, people really need to expose them. But justice system isn't doing it. Politicians aren't doing it. They're probably involved. Anyways, I just thought it was interesting. He even mentioned it. What a lot of us are doing, I wouldn't say a lot of us, a few of us are doing, more people should do it, is going back in time, going back through history, wherever you can find it, find people who are researching, doing the stuff we're doing now, where they kind of went back the same way, and saying, okay, are they predicting the future, and how are they predicting it? Is it because, hey, everything's so simple that's easy to predict, or there are patterns of behavior and actions that have happened in the past, and we know it's going to happen in the future because of the players that are out there, the power players, people who rule you. I would say not rule me, but maybe they do. So find those people, see what happened to them, see what happened with their predictions, and look where we are today. And a lot of these people that I research that figured out a lot of stuff, they ended up dead, and not just a natural way, dead as in that's very peculiar. And as always, I like to say it, I am not depressed. I do not want to kill myself. I do not want to do anything crazy. I'm just trying to get people aware of what's going on. Too few of us. Just no hero complex. We pretty much have to just weather the storm, it seems. I mean, whenever something happens, it's gonna happen. We don't have enough people. Too many people asleep. Too many people afraid. Too many people just okay with the system that we're already at. And even if it has child pedophilia, child sacrifices, prostitution rings, all this crap, people are still okay with it, it seems. It's depressing, but we'll see. We'll see when people have had enough, you know, when it happens to their children, maybe they'll step up or something. But then by then it'll be too late. Yeah, good point, Eric. It's sad, but anyways, I gotta get going. I will hopefully see you in an hour and a half. If it's not on me, check out Ryan Bannock. He usually does a show, and it's an open topic. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you guys later.